The first thing I heard was glass shattering across the ballroom floor. Every conversation stopped. Heads turned. A woman near the buffet gasped. And standing 20 feet away, frozen beside a table of miniature cheesecakes and shrimp cocktail, was Melissa Grant, my former best friend. The woman who ran off with my fiancé the night before our wedding. The crystal glass had slipped right out of her hand. Red wine spread across the carpet. Nobody moved, nobody spoke, and for the strangest moment, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because 7 years earlier, I would have given anything to see Melissa lose her perfect composure in public. Back then, I was the one dropping things. Back then, I was the one shaking. Back then, I was the woman whose life had exploded overnight. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In September of 2018, I was 40 years old and finally getting married. Not a whirlwind romance. The sensible marriage, the grown-up one. Ryan Mercer and I had been together almost 4 years. He managed sales at a Ford dealership. Everybody liked Ryan. He remembered names. He shook hands like he meant it. He could make strangers feel like old friends. Looking back, I realized that was part of the problem. The church was booked. The reception hall was paid for. My dress hung in the guest bedroom closet. My Aunt Linda had driven down from Wichita. My cousin Denise flew in from Dallas. Everything was ready. The day before the wedding, Melissa came over to help organize place cards. We'd been friends since middle school. Survived bad haircuts, bad boyfriends, bad decisions together. We sat at my dining room table eating takeout while sorting names alphabetically. Ryan stopped by after work, kissed my forehead, made some joke about expensive weddings, then left. Nothing seemed wrong. The next morning I woke before sunrise, wedding day. I made coffee and stood by the kitchen window feeling nervous, excited, grateful. By 8, Ryan hadn't answered texts. By 9, he wasn't answering calls. By 10, something inside me started to tighten. At 11:37 my phone buzzed. One text, one sentence. I'm sorry, I can't do this. That was it. 4 years together. One sentence. Then my cousin Denise walked in holding her phone, her face completely pale. She showed me a Facebook photo. Ryan and Melissa together at a gas station outside town. Posted 30 minutes earlier. I don't remember much after that. Not in order. Trauma doesn't organize memories neatly. It scatters them. I remember dropping my phone. I remember my aunt crying. I remember sitting on the floor. Then I remember standing back up, because there were practical things to do. That's the cruel part nobody talks about. Even when your heart breaks, paperwork still exists. I spent 6 hours calling guests, repeating the same humiliating explanation. The worst call was somehow also the least terrible. Aunt Linda listened quietly, then said, "Honey, if I drove 4 hours for nothing, at least let me take you to dinner." I cried harder after that. The months that followed weren't dramatic. They were worse. They were ordinary. Thursday therapy. Same office. Same brown couch, same box of tissues. I sold my house because I couldn't afford it alone. I learned which grocery stores Ryan and Melissa used, which restaurants, which church. Springfield isn't a huge city. Avoiding people takes effort, but I managed. Slowly, life moved forward. Not because I wanted it to, because life always does. I started an event planning business. Small weddings, retirement parties, corporate lunches. Nothing glamorous. Just enough to keep the lights on, then enough to hire help, then enough to build something stable. Not spectacular, just honest. After what I'd been through, honest felt pretty good. 7 years passed. Then an envelope arrived. Springfield High School, class of 1995. 30-year reunion. Holiday Inn Conference Center, September 2025. I almost threw it away. Actually, I did throw it away. Then I dug it out of the trash that night because one question kept bothering me. What if I was still hiding? What if 7 years later, Ryan and Melissa were still controlling where I felt comfortable showing up? That thought irritated me more than the reunion itself. So I bought a ticket. The night of the reunion, I sat in my car in the parking lot for almost 15 minutes, hands shaking against the steering wheel. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror and said out loud, "Come on, Dana, you're not 40 anymore. You're not that woman." Then I got out of the car and walked inside. The ballroom smelled exactly the way every reunion, retirement banquet, and church fundraiser smells. Coffee, old carpet, a little too much perfume, a little too much air freshener trying to cover the old carpet. Safe conversations, hugs, questions about work and parents. For 20 minutes, things weren't terrible. Then, the ballroom doors opened, and there they were. Ryan Mercer and Melissa Grant, walking side by side, looking exactly like the kind of couple that posts smiling vacation photos while secretly hating each other. Melissa in a cream dress that probably cost more than my first car. Ryan in an expensive sports jacket. Both polished, prepared, expecting an audience. Melissa spotted me immediately. Her smile froze for half a second, then returned brighter than before. That told me everything. She was nervous. Good, so was I. The conversation that followed was painful in the particular way only reunions can be. Melissa performed. Cabo. Scottsdale. The lake house remodel. A luxury cruise. Every story circling back to money or status. Every sentence a quiet measurement. At one point, she sighed. We've traveled so much lately. I nearly choked on my iced tea. Ryan jumped in when someone asked about my business. Small business ownership is tough these days. Not openly insulting. The fake concern kind. The kind people use when they're really just measuring themselves against you. I excused myself toward the refreshment table. My hands felt shaky. I hated that. I hated that after 7 years he could still do that. Breathe, Dana. When I turned around, Ryan was standing there alone. I immediately knew something bad was coming. You know how animals sense storms? He picked up a drink, looked around, then back at me. You know, I always wondered how things would have turned out. I didn't answer. Honestly, Dana. He leaned slightly closer, just enough for nearby people to hear. Leaving you was the best decision I ever made. Complete silence, the spreading kind. Someone stopped chewing. Someone looked down at their shoes. A woman nearby muttered, "Oh, wow." Nobody laughed, nobody agreed, but nobody's challenged him either. And somehow that hurt almost as much. 7 years of rebuilding, 7 years of therapy, 7 years of moving forward. And one sentence still knew exactly where the scar was. I forced a small smile. Nothing dramatic. Then I said, "Well, I'm glad one of us got what they wanted." I picked up my drink, turned away, and walked to the other side of the room. Then the ballroom doors opened again. A few people glanced toward the entrance, then a few more, then nearly everyone. Because walking inside was Ethan Brooks, and beside him was a little boy in a Springfield Cardinals baseball cap sitting crooked on his head. Back in high school, Ethan had been quiet, painfully quiet, sat near the back, got good grades, never caused trouble. If you'd asked me in 1995 which guy from our class would become one of the most successful businessmen in Southwest Missouri, I probably wouldn't have guessed Ethan. Life rarely asks our opinion before surprising us. He looked older, we all did, a little gray at the temples. But he carried himself differently than most people in the room. Not arrogant, not flashy, comfortable, like a man who no longer needed anybody's approval. The second Noah spotted me, his entire face lit up. He broke free from Ethan's hand before I could react. I barely had time to kneel before he launched himself into my arms. Mama. The word echoed louder than it should have, maybe because everything else had gone silent at exactly the same moment. Mama, we found you. A few gasps floated through the room. Someone whispered, "Did he just say mama?" Then came the sound that started the entire evening, a wine glass slipping, crashing, red wine spreading across the carpet. I looked up. Melissa stood frozen. For the first time all night, she looked genuinely shocked, not smug, not superior, shocked, and standing beside her, Ryan looked confused, then something closer to worried. I hugged Noah tight. "Hey buddy, you came." He nodded enthusiastically. "You said there'd be cake." Of course, that's what you remember. I'd first met Ethan 3 years earlier. My event planning business had landed a contract for a regional conference in Branson. I was exhausted, understaffed, convinced the whole event was about to collapse. Ethan was one of the keynote speakers. I accidentally spilled coffee all over his presentation materials. Instead of getting annoyed, he helped me clean it up, then spent 20 minutes helping move tables. Most executives would have disappeared. He stayed. That was my first clue. Then came Noah. His mother had died in a car accident 2 years before. I never asked for details. Grief has its own privacy. Over time, Noah became part of my life. Movie nights, school pickups, pancake breakfasts, little moments that quietly become important before you realize they're happening. One evening, Noah called me mama for the first time. I corrected him immediately. "Honey, I'm not your mama." He looked at me with the seriousness only children manage. "I know." "Then why'd you call me that?" "Because you're my other mama." Then he went back to eating chicken nuggets as if he'd just solved the mystery of the universe. Kids do that. They drop life-changing statements into conversations and move on. The nickname stayed, not because anyone planned it, because Noah wanted it. Now Cheryl Benson was walking toward me with something deliberate in her expression, the kind that takes years to build up to. You know, she said quietly, I've never told anybody this. She'd worked at Grant Motors for almost 3 years, Melissa's father's dealerships. She knew Ryan before everything happened. Ryan and Melissa didn't suddenly fall in love. I waited. They'd been seeing each other for months. The word landed softly, but it landed. It wasn't really about love. Cheryl continued. At least not for him. Ryan talked about the dealerships constantly, expansion plans, ownership opportunities. She nodded toward Ryan. He saw Melissa as a shortcut. There it was. Simple, ugly, ordinary, the worst betrayals usually are. Not some grand romance, not destiny, opportunity, money, a faster path. Ryan appeared immediately. That's not what happened. Several classmates turned. The circle grew. Nobody announced it. People simply drifted closer the way they always do when honesty and conflict approach each other. You really want to do this? Cheryl asked. I'd like to hear the rest, said Karen. Then another voice, then another. Nobody hostile, just interested, which somehow made it worse for Ryan. Then Ethan stepped forward. Not dramatically, just a man joining a conversation. Ryan attempted recovery. Not everybody gets lucky. Ethan studied him for a moment, then tilted his head slightly. Weren't you the salesman who tried to sell me that F-150 with the bad transmission? Silence, then laughter, real laughter, the uncontrollable kind. Karen nearly spit out her drink. Ryan's face turned red. I don't remember that. I do, Ethan said. The room erupted again. Nobody was attacking Ryan. They were simply seeing him clearly, maybe for the first time. I looked at Ryan directly. For 7 years, I thought you left because I wasn't enough. The room went still. Tonight I finally understand something. You didn't choose something better. I saw Melissa flinch. You chose something easier. Silence, the kind that arrives when everyone recognizes the truth at the exact same moment. I don't hate either of you anymore. Ryan blinked. Melissa looked stunned. I just feel sorry for you. For 7 years I'd imagined revenge as something loud, something explosive. Instead it felt like setting down a heavy box I'd been carrying too long. Across the room, Noah waved a brownie at me, completely unaware that decades of emotional baggage had just collapsed behind him. I laughed. And for the first time that night, it felt effortless. I found Melissa on the second-floor balcony, alone, leaning against the railing. September air. Distant traffic from I-44. The normal sounds of a reunion drifting through the doors behind us. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, she said, You looked happy in there. I am. She nodded slowly. I can see that. Then, quietly, Everybody thinks I won. I looked at her, the expensive dress, the jewelry, the years of carefully constructed images. I spent years convincing people my life was perfect, she said. I got really good at it. She stared into the parking lot. The first year was exciting, maybe even the second, but after a while I started thinking about you. Every time Ryan disappointed me, I remembered what he did to you. A pause. If he could leave you the night before your wedding, what makes me think he won't leave me someday? There it was, not scandal, not collapse, fear, years of quiet fear following her into every room. I thought I'd enjoy hearing that. Standing there listening to a life built on uncertainty, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired and oddly sad. He still chases shortcuts, she said. Just different ones. She looked at me, really looked at me. I was always jealous of you. You were the person everybody trusted. You spent years trying to be decent. I spent years trying to be impressive. Then she straightened. I should get back inside. She stopped at the doorway. Dana. Yeah. I'm sorry. Not the kind that fixes anything. Not the kind that erases 7 years. Just an honest one. Late, incomplete, real. I nodded. Not because everything was forgiven. Because carrying anger had become exhausting. Take care of yourself, Melissa. She smiled sadly. You too. Then she walked away, and that was the last private conversation we ever had. 6 months later, spring arrived in Missouri. The kind of spring where everybody suddenly remembers why they tolerate winter. On a Saturday afternoon in April, I sat on aluminum bleachers at a community park on the east side of Springfield. Noah was playing second base, or at least attempting to. Mostly he seemed interested in chasing butterflies. "Watch the ball, buddy." He waved, completely ignored the advice. Beside me, Ethan laughed. We sat there sharing hot dogs and lemonade. Nothing glamorous. Nothing extraordinary. Just life. Real life. The kind I used to think was boring. Now it felt precious. A few months earlier, Ethan and I had quietly started talking about marriage. Not a big wedding. Neither of us wanted that. One wedding disaster in a lifetime is enough. Something small, close family, close friends, nothing fancy, just honest. At one point, Ethan reached over and took my hand. No grand gesture. Just a simple squeeze, the kind that says, "I'm here." 7 years earlier, I measured success differently. Money, status, appearances. The things Ryan and Melissa spent years chasing. Now success looked like this. A sunny afternoon, a child laughing on a baseball field, a man I trusted, peace. The people who betrayed me once believed they had the power to define my future. For a long time, I believed it too. I thought my story ended the day Ryan walked away. I thought being abandoned was the most important thing that ever happened to me. I was wrong. It wasn't the ending. It was simply a chapter. A painful one. But still just a chapter. If you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal, after heartbreak, after disappointment, I hope you remember one thing. The people who hurt you don't get to write the rest of your story. Only you do. And sometimes the happiest chapters are the ones you never saw coming.